Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to welcome you to our series of CDA webinars presenting today the CDA portfolio preparation and your presenters. And we want to welcome everybody. And we also bring greetings from our organization, the Council, from Dr. Calvin Moore Jr., and who's our CEO and President, and Abina Okran Jackson, who's our Vice President for Programs. We have with us our colleague, Raquel Andrade. She's the Director of CDA Credentialing. Raquel?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today. I'm the director of the credentialing department, and I'll pass it back to you, Vilma.
And I'm Vilma Williams. I'm Senior Manager for the Multilingual Program. We have the pleasure to be here with you. Before we even start, I want to make some reminders, give you some reminders about logistics. I know that this question is going to come at some point, and we're going to refer to this in the middle of the presentation too, about certificates and the video or the recording of this presentation. So this presentation is going to be available for all CAN members. If you are not a member of CAN, we urge you to please become a member. It's free, and we're going to talk about this at the end too, so that you can view the presentation anytime you wish. And also we will offer certificates for attendance. And the certificate of attendance is for those people who have registered with your name. So if you register with the same name that you want the certificate, you will have that type of certificate. The presentation, the recorded presentation, is going to be placed in the Media Center of CAN. Again, if you're not a member of CAN, you should join CAN. And the last thing I'm going to refer to is that we want your questions, of course, questions that are relevant to the information that are pertinent to the information that we'll be presenting. So please use your questions button to write your questions, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible. If you have any questions that are more personal or more individual, we want you to call us later at the council customer service number so that we can answer your questions. Okay, so without any further ado, now we're going to move into the presentation. So we all know that CDA is the best first step, and it's a credential that is nationally recognized. It's transferable because if you obtain your credential in one state, you can go to another state and work and seek work, as the CDA is embedded into the legislation of almost all states. It varies from state to state, but CDA is an option for you to be employed. And it is competency-based. And we're going to talk about what does it mean for the credential to be competency-based. Is that when you get this credential, when you earn this credential, you have learned the theory. We have a requirement for 120 hours of professional early education, like the body of language, the essentials you need to know in theory. And it's based on 8 subject areas. But you also are required to have practice. Within the past 3 years, you have to have 480 hours of experience in that same setting that you're applying for. So the experience is your competency building. Once you have those two, you can demonstrate, once you make that connection between what you're learning in your classes, what the theory is and how to apply it into practice, you're ready to demonstrate that you can work with intention. This makes you feel, become intentional when you make your plans. You're consciously competent. You know what you're doing. You can explain it to other people. Therefore, you can apply appropriate practice in your daily work with children and families. And the most important thing is that then you're ready to meet the competency standards. So based on this, we're going to talk today about what are our goals for this session. The first goal is that we're going to outline the professional portfolio components for you. We are going to describe how to prepare all the necessary cover sheets, and we'll explain all of this to you. We are going to clarify the resource collection and the meaning of each resource that you need to provide. And we will have a comprehensive explanation of the competency statements, the statements of competence, and the professional philosophy statement that you have to prepare. And also we will be providing you with reminders throughout the presentation. The first thing we want to talk about is the books. Everything that you're gonna hear Raquel and I talk about is in the competency standards book. If it's not in the book, it's not true, right? And these books are required for you to prepare and to apply for the CDA credential. This is absolutely true when you prepare your portfolio, because all of the requirements for the portfolio are embedded into the pages of this book. We will have specifics about the portfolio, the instructions in detail of the process, the verification visit exam, in all the forms that you're gonna need, not only for application, but to prepare your portfolio. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the family questionnaires, the reflective dialogue worksheet, and the official comprehensive scoring document. All of those are embedded into this book. Relita, can you take us through the steps of the how to earn a CDA credential, and then focus on what are we gonna focus today? Thank you.
Sure, we'll go through this briefly. The credentialing process is broken up into 3 separate categories. There's the prepare phase, the apply phase, and the demonstrate phase. In terms of the preparation phase, those are all the prerequisite requirements that candidates have to complete before they can actually submit an application to the council. This does involve being able to speak, read, and write well enough in the language of the assessment to be understood and understand others. Typically, this is the language that the candidates consistently speak with the children and families on a daily basis. So the process of selecting the language of the assessment is based on the language or languages that the candidate consistently uses with children and families. In terms of education, candidates are required to have 120 clock hours of early childhood education training, and these hours are specific to the age group of the credential type that the candidate has selected. So for example, if they're applying for a center-based preschool credential, those 120 clock hours will be focused on children between the ages of 3 to 5 years old. If they're applying for a center-based infant toddler, then those hours should be focused on children between the ages of birth to 36 months. Candidates are also required to have at least 480 hours of experience working with children within the past 3 years prior to applying. And that experience is also setting and age specific. So again, tied to the credential type that the candidate is applying for. And then lastly, there's a documentation piece. Candidates are required to prepare certain documentation prior to applying. Most specifically, the professional portfolio. Candidates are required to have their portfolio completely done prior to applying. I know that there's a lot of misinformation about the portfolio. Some people say, well, you actually have 6 months to complete your portfolio after you submit your application, or as long as it's done before you have your verification visit, it's okay. No, the portfolio is actually a prerequisite requirement, and so it should be completed prior to a candidate submitting their application. And that portfolio is also based on the setting and age group of the credential selected. Once the candidate has met all of the prerequisite requirements, then they're ready to submit their application. They submit their application directly to the council. And they have 2 ways of doing that. They can either apply online using our online system, or they can submit a paper application. We do strongly encourage candidates to submit online applications. That process is much smoother, it's faster, it's very self-paced. If they choose to submit a paper application, we do still have that option available. The paper application can be found in the back of the competency standards book, but the processing time is much, much slower. Processing time for paper applications is between 6 to 8 weeks. So again, we strongly encourage online applications, and the fee is slightly cheaper online. It's $425 as opposed to $500. Once the candidate submits their application, that's when they are authorized to complete their verification visit with their PD specialist and complete the exam at Pearson View. the candidates are given a full 6 months to complete those two components of the assessment process. And once they have completed both components, that is when they will receive their credentialing decision. And so that's the assessment process in a nutshell.
And we have highlighted the documentation because today we're going to be talking about just that.
Yes, and I do see a few questions already. Somebody is asking, how far back can a student earn their 120 hours of training before applying for the CDA? So in terms of the 120 hours, there is no time frame or deadline. Candidates can use training as far back as 20 years if they would like, but the education requirement itself has a component of being 120 hours centered around the most up-to-date research and practices. In addition to that, the 120 hours must fall into the 8 CDA subject areas, and we do update our subject areas frequently. So candidates must make sure that they have at least 10 hours in each of the 8 CDA subject areas, and so the current subject areas. Vilma, I think you always like to provide that example about dual language learning. Did you want to speak a little bit on that?
Dual language learning?
In terms of the 120 hours.
Yeah, if we talk about 120 hours, if you got your education a long time ago, like in the 80s, even the 90s, the chances are that you did not cover in your education some subject areas that are recent, so like dual language learning, the brain development, etc. So that is something that we want you to learn because you need to have the latest information, the latest theory regarding early childhood education. If you apply for bilingual, which is something we're going to talk about, definitely that's one of the requirements too, that you, within your education, you have obtained hours for dual language learning. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted me to refer to.
No, just more so that explanation in terms of why we don't actually have a time frame for training, but it's more centered around just making sure. Making sure candidates.
We don't have it. Yeah, cover all of those subjects. In the past, we used to say a long time ago, your courses must be within 10 years. We don't need to do that because the coursework that we want you to learn is the latest in the trends of early childhood education. So, you're not learning something old. We expect you to learn the new trends, the new body of knowledge in the field of early childhood education. And that's why we don't worry about that. And you have to have a book that is recent so that you can go by those instructions, which I think Raquel mentioned already. Okay, moving along. You want to talk about this, Raquelita?
Sure. We do have a few more questions though. Someone is asking, does working at a previous daycare count towards the 480 hours? So in terms of the 480 hours of experience, candidates can go as far back as 3 years from submitting their application. So they can accumulate the 480 hours over a time frame of 3 years, and it can be from various programs as long as they are all in the same setting and age group of the credential type selected. So if someone is applying for a center-based preschool credential and they have worked at several different center-based programs with children 3 to 5, then they can count all of those hours within the past 3 years towards the 480 hours of experience. We also have another question here. Let's see. Someone is asking about the exam, and we can quickly touch on that, even though this is about the portfolio preparation. Someone is asking about the preschool exam specifically, asking if it's changed from covering child development from 3 to 5 to now 0 to 5. Vilma, did you want to touch on that?
Absolutely. We never had a requirement that says to study child development 3 to 5. We say child growth and development, which goes from birth to 5 years old. It is extremely important that everybody knows how children grow and learn from the beginning until they finish their early years. before they go to kindergarten. So if you are applying for infant and toddler, you need to know the whole spectrum of child growth and development. You're working with babies, of course, you know, you were the first stages of early childhood, and then you refer to the preschool years. If you are applying for preschool, you definitely need to have the basis on the foundations of how children grow and learn from the beginning, because you're gonna get those children when they become 3 years old or 36 months, and you need to know how to you know, how to work with whatever they have learned. That is how you recognize if children are on target in their development, or if they are not, if they are behind in their development. So you do need to know, when we say child growth and development, which is subject area 8, you need to know all that is offered. You don't need to know deeply, you know, you don't have to do deep studies on that, but we require, for example, you have to learn in that subject area the theories, Piaget, Maslow, Erickson. You have to learn from their point of view, and from their expertise, you know, how children grow and learn. And that is very important, because you're getting a credential that where you are going to become a professional. It's not a job anymore, it's a profession. So yes, there are going to be some questions, not a lot, you know, but there are going to be some questions in the exam for preschool that deal with that. And you should know the answer, because you have to learn about the theorist. So I hope I answer your question. Any more questions?
One more asking about how do candidates document the hours of experience. So it's always a good idea for candidates to maintain documentation of their 480 hours of experience. It's actually not part of the portfolio requirements. It is a question that we ask on the application under the verification section. So for the purposes of submitting their application, they just need to indicate that they have completed the 480 hours of experience. But the council does always reserve the right to ask for proof of completion of the prerequisite requirements. And we do occasionally audit candidates. So sometimes candidates will get a surprise phone call saying, you know, you're part of this audit process. Can you please submit your documentation to show that you met the 480 hours of experience? So initially, we do not require any documentation, but sometimes candidates are part of an audit process, so they should always have that ready to provide to the council. That can be as simple as a letter from the employer on official letterhead. It may come, we've seen people submit pay stubs before and so forth. So there are various ways that a candidate can prove that they do have the 480 hours of experience.
Okay. Should we move on and we can take more questions? Because this is the
Sure.
perfect time to talk about selecting the credential type. Okay,
Sure.
go ahead.
All right.
Yes. Thank you.
So candidates need to make sure that they select the credential type that they will be pursuing at the very beginning of the process. That is a very important decision because it impacts the candidate's preparation process all the way from the beginning. And here we're just talking a little bit more about that literacy and language requirement that we were speaking about earlier, that candidates have to be able to speak, read, and write in the language of the assessment well enough to fulfill the responsibilities of a CDA candidate. The language of the assessment we refer to as language specialization. And again, it's solely determined on the language or languages that the candidate conducts his or her daily work with children and families. And that's how the language of the assessment is determined. It's not determined by personal preference or the language that the candidate feels most comfortable speaking, but it is the language that they use in their daily work.
So in other words, if your job requires you to speak English to conduct your daily work in English, you have to apply for the English. That will be your the language of your assessment. If your work requires you to speak Spanish, that will be your language of the assessment. If your work requires you to speak 2 languages, English and another language, in Spanish or any other language, you can apply for bilingual specialization, correct, Raquel?
Yes, that is correct, Vilma.
And even if your job requires you to speak another language that is not English or Spanish, you are able to apply for authorization to have your assessment in that language. And we have conducted like 26 assessments in 26 other languages other than Spanish and English. That's just for your information. Okay, moving along.
Okay. So selecting the credential type at the very beginning of the process impacts all of the following things we can see here. It does determine which training courses should be taken to complete the 120 hours of training, the setting and age group in which the 480 hours of experience will need to be completed. It determines which competency standards book a CDA candidate needs to purchase and which requirements that they will follow to prepare the professional portfolio. And it even affects the PD specialists that the candidate can select, which exam they will complete, and also in which setting and age group the CDA candidate will be observed. So all of these requirements are both setting and age specific, which is why it is so important for a candidate to be clear at the very beginning of the process in terms of which credential type they are pursuing. Okay, so now we're talking about preparing for the assessment. Vilma, did you want to take over here?
So we're going to talk about the portion, the stage where you have to prepare for your documentation. In the case of the candidate, their job of the candidate, the responsibility is to develop a CDA professional portfolio, prepare one. And what is that? We're going to talk about that. So the prepare and develop in the portfolio is intended to be a wonderful, gratifying professional experience. It should not be a pain. It should not be a problem. It should be great. Okay, it is also developing the portfolio is intended to help you organize your professional thoughts and to help you make the connections that we talked earlier between the theory and that you're learning in your classes and how you're going to implement those theories into your daily practice. For some of you, it will just validate what you do in your practice. It is an opportunity to reflect on your very own work and on your role as an early childhood educator and what that role means to children and families. And also, it is a wonderful opportunity to select the best of your practice because we're going to ask you to do that. You know, what do you do best? And this is portfolio. It should be also a place where you can brag about yourself. I know that we're not used to doing that, but that's what it means. That's what we want you to do. So developing your portfolio, part of this preparation process includes you that before before submitting an application, you have to have your portfolio ready before you send your application to the council. When you send your application to the council, it means I'm done, I'm ready, I have met all the requirements. You can come and assess me now. That's what it means. So your portfolio, there is no description about how it should look, but it should be legible, like the professional development specialist should be able to read it. You should be able to read it and understand, right? Portable, because this is your working tool. We want you to use it. Nobody's going to take it from you. We want you to use it in your daily work. If you go to a meeting, if you go to some place where you're going to need it, it's portable and it's professional looking. So that is when you will have the opportunity to put your own touch, of how you're going to design it. It shouldn't be like pages that are loose with a rubber band. It has to be professional looking, manageable in size, very important, current. It has to be current. So once you complete your professional portfolio, that's not really the end. For your own self, your own work, you should periodically update it and change information and get rid of the information that is old, something like that's the idea. And the most important thing, it should be written in your very own words, in the candidate's own words. We discourage anyone to pay people to write your portfolio or to try to write it in a way that it doesn't really reflect who you are, even if you have some mistakes. But now you have the computers, if you do it in a computer, that spell checks for you and all of that, right? But it should be you. It should be when you read it, it should be the reflection of how you speak, how you express yourself, how you conduct yourself. So how do you arrange the portfolio? And here you have two examples of the many. Some people, I've seen a portfolio that somebody put it in wood, in the little box. The most common way to arrange it is in a 3-ring or 2-ring binder, like the one on the left side. Some people use these plastic containers, and then you have to divide it, so you can use these tabs, color tabs, or any way that can reflect, the organization of your portfolio. So what are the components in the portfolio? We talked about cover sheets before, and this is in your book. All these cover sheets are in the back of your book. Cover sheets so that you can organize it in different sections. So there are cover sheets. The first one is called my professional portfolio cover sheet, and I'm going to show them to you. Second one is the summary of my education, because I need to summarize my education. Third, family questionnaires cover sheet in the completed family questionnaires. We're going to talk about that, because you are required to get the opinion of the parents that work with you, the ones that have their children in your group. So we need their opinion. It's very valid. And you're going to have a section for that. And then a reflective dialogue worksheet, that is the form that you're going to use in preparation for your assessment. At the end of your verification visit, you have a reflective dialogue. So you need to be prepared. Some of it needs to be prepared by you, as if you were the candidate, of course. And then what I call the heart of the portfolio, in this frame here, you have the resource collection, the reflective statements of competence, and the professional philosophy statement. So today we're going to show you what is expected from all of this. So the forms I mentioned before, you have here the summary of my education on the left side, then the family questionnaire, with that also has a summary, and the reflective dialogue worksheet. Do you see that? Actually, for the reflective dialogue worksheet, the candidate needs to complete the boxes A and B, and I'll tell you real quick, that these boxes are going to be after you read your questionnaires from the families, and then you'll summarize on letter A, what do the families think about my professional strengths? What do I do well? And you will write them on box A, and in box B, you will write what my families in the questionnaire say that I still need to grow professionally, and then you write them there. Those are just little things. Okay, so here is the first cover sheet, the professional portfolio, that is required when you organize the contents of your portfolio. It has 10 different sections with tabs from A to J, and you also should be checking it as you complete your portfolio to ensure that it's all meeting all the requirements. And then when your portfolio is being completed, you sign it and you date it. Okay. So you use those, you check them, and then when they're all done, you sign it and you date it. The summary of your education, which is the second cover sheet, you give us information on the hours that you have completed for all those 8 subject areas you needed to study, the theory. When you went to your CDA classes and they told you the theory for the 120 hours, this is a sheet that you sign and date that you have done that, you have completed. Behind this, you put your certificates or what diploma or your transcript, whatever you have that verifies that you completed indeed this 120 hours, at least 120. Some people have over that, which is fine, no problem. And then you have the summary of your questionnaires. This is how the questionnaires look on the right side. And the families have to complete them. And if you can notice in the middle, on the bottom of the middle form, there are the questions and the 3 different levels that the parents can answer, the families answer. 3, you're very capable. They say that you are wonderful, you know everything, you're capable, you have a big area of strength. 2 means, if they check 2 means you're okay, you're capable, you're competent, fine, 1, you need more improvement, or they just don't know that much about you, right? Of course, you want all the families to rate you on a 3. but let this also questionnaire be used as an evaluation tool for yourself, your self-evaluation. Look at the things that they are going to answer. Maybe you don't do that. Well, maybe I should do that so that when they answer, I will get a good rating. And on the left side is a summary sheet where you will explain to us how many questionnaires you distributed, how many you collected, what did the family say were your areas of strength and your growth, etc. And then you check that you completed that. And this is the worksheet that I mentioned to you before, that where you will transfer the information. You are preparing for your assessment, you're preparing for your verification visit. And the third portion of the verification visit is the reflective dialogue. And we ask you to please complete boxes A and B of this form. That is the reflective dialogue worksheet, okay, in preparation for your verification visit. And then the rest of the form will be completed with your professional development specialist on the day of your final assessment, on the day of your verification visit. So, Raquelita, would you like to take us to the resource collection?
Sure, thanks, Vilma. So the other part of the professional portfolio is the resource collection. And here we just have a very brief listing of those resource items that, again, the details can be found within the competency standards book. But essentially, these are resources that we feel that the candidates should have on hand at any time when they're working with the children in the classroom. We do require candidates to have first aid and pediatric or infant and child CPR. So proof of that would need to be in the portfolio, a sample weekly menu, a weekly plan, 9 learning activities, bibliographies of children's books, a family resource guide, several record keeping forms, state regulations, information about early childhood associations, and the child abuse and neglect legal requirements. So again, this is a very brief look at those resource items.
All the specifics about these items and by the setting are in the competency standards books, right?
Correct. So the collection of the early childhood resources that candidates should use, be aware of, have read, and use in their daily work with children and families. So that's basically how we compiled this list. Again, just thinking about what resources do candidates really need to have at hand. If the program that the candidate works with does not have these already within the program or is not currently using them, this is a really good exercise and a good opportunity to bring them into your program or to your classroom. Part of this process is to learn how and where to look for resources. If the candidate doesn't already have them, if their program doesn't already have them, again, this is a good exercise for candidates to learn where can I go and look for this information. So places they can go, local library, an early childhood resource site, or simply by doing internet searches. A lot of this information nowadays can be found on the internet. So it is a learning process for candidates. It's particularly for training programs. It's not about providing them with the resources, but showing them where they can go to look for the resources. If they find resources on the internet, for example, a weekly menu or example of a menu, they can take it and personalize it. At least this way they have something to start with to get an idea, and then they just adjust it to make it their own. Now Vilma's going to talk a little bit about the reflective statements.
Okay. So in order to understand, remember I mentioned before the heart of the portfolio is 3 things, right? The reflective statements of competence is the first thing that we're going to explain to you. So what are the reflective statements of competence? To understand this, we have to talk about the CDA competency standards. So a long time ago, in the early 70s, when the CDA was created, a group of experts and professionals in the field of early childhood education and related fields came up with how are we going to measure, how are we going to know if these teachers are competent? So they created the CDA competency standards. they measure the performance of the early childhood educators earning the CDA credential. So the competency standards are everything you see in this visual, and they are composed by competency goals. So on the left side, you have 6 big, broad competency goals. They are the dreams of the profession. They measure if you're competent or not, but they are very, very general and broad. For example, think about a child that you love in your life. Wouldn't you like a baby or a 3, 4, or a baby? Would you like when you take them to a program, whether it's a center or family child care, would you like, or if the family is working with home visitors, would you like the professional that in whose hands these children are to be able to establish and maintain a safe, healthy learning environment? You don't want to take them in an environment that is not safe or that is unhealthy, right? So you want this educator to be able to establish and maintain a safe, healthy learning environment. But what does that mean? It's the dream, right? That's the competency goal. That's the goal. But in order for us to make it very specific for people to understand what do we mean, we also provide you for this goal, for each goal, with functional areas on the right side. This describe in more detail what is expected from the educators, from the teachers. And we have different functional areas for different goals, different numbers. Like you notice for the first goal, we have 3 functional areas. So the goal, the dream is that the person earning the CDA is able to establish and maintain a safe and healthy learning environment, right? And then we explain that further when we talk about functional area safe. What does healthy mean? What are the expectations for this person in learning environment? And we explain in the book, how do we define safe? What do we define? What do we mean by healthy? What do we mean by learning environment? And what is expected of the educator, the adult educator, in their functions? That's what they call functional areas. How do you function? Do you meet this expectation, right? So we have 6 big goals. Each of these goals has a number of functional areas. The second goal is, again, the dream is that this person that is going to earn the CDA is able to advance the physical and the intellectual competence of the children, right? And in this goal, we have 4 functional areas. Physical, what does it mean? What is expected from the educator? Cognitive, communication, and creative, right? In the third goal, to support social and emotional development and to provide positive guidance. We're talking about something that is critical. From birth to 5 is when every experience that children are provided will mark their lives forever. So in this case, the social and emotional development is a very sensitive subject, right? And includes self. How do we help children be proud of who they are, and be sure to have a great self-esteem, right? Social. So critical. How do I interact with other children? How am I learning? Even when I'm 1 month old, 2 months old, 3 months old, how is my social development going to be guided by this person earning the CDA? And then guidance, which in the past, all times we used to call it discipline, right? But we call it guidance because the adult will guide the behavior of the children, will guide them to make that learning experience, right? Then we have, you notice these first 3 goals are related to the candidates' work with children directly. The 4th goal is directly to the work with the families. So the dream is, the goal is that the candidate can demonstrate that they can establish a positive and productive relationship with families. And there's only one functional area that explains what do we mean by that. And so this is focused on families. 5th goal, the candidate needs to demonstrate that they meet this competency standard, this goal. to ensure they can ensure a well-run, purposeful program responsive to participant needs. So my program in my classroom or in my home, right? If you do family child care. So I have to, and we have only one functional area, program management, that explains who's a good manager in an environment like this, right? Again, the focus here is not the children, is not the families, is myself as a candidate for CDA. How I can demonstrate that I'm a good program manager. And the last goal, again, is for myself also. It's not for the children, it's not for the families, although this spills over that, but what is my commitment? The goal is to maintain a commitment to professionalism, to this profession. And there's only one functional area, professionalism. So I said all this because if we go back on the statements, we're asking the candidates, and now I have the goals only here, the dreams of the profession, right? Because that's the point. We are assessing candidates based on this. We are assessing you because we ask you to demonstrate that you meet this through preparing your portfolio, when they come to observe you, when you take your exam. All of that assessment is based on, can you meet these goals, right? Okay, so in the portfolio, we're talking about the portfolio, we're asking you for each of those goals, we want you to write a reflective statement of your competence. And then the book is very specific. It says for each statement that you write, so again, go back, for each of these goals, for each of these dreams and their respective functional areas, right, within, you're going to write a statement to demonstrate to the council, I meet this, I'm good at this, and how am I good at this? So the book says, please begin writing a paragraph for each goal, that for each of these statements, that where you write how your practice meet this the standard, how your practice meets this goal, right? So you start writing, I believe that I meet this goal because blah, 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 blah. And we're gonna share some samples with you, okay? And then the book continues and says, now candidate, go to your resource collection. Remember that Raquel explained the resource collection? And they're gonna tell you to take an item from the resource collection to reflect on this item and in your own philosophy. And they're gonna ask you questions. The menu, for example, remember the menu that you presented? And they're gonna ask you, who wrote this menu? Who prepared it? If someone else prepared it, then tell us what would you change. If you prepare it, tell us what are the strengths of your menu and how would you enhance it, or something like that, okay? So you have to follow the book, and you answer, and you follow the numbering pattern that is utilized in this book. Once you get the idea, you're gonna want to write a lot. So the book also says, candidate, stop. No more than 500 per statement, per goal, okay? So between 200 to 500 words is something that it's like 2 pages. Don't go overboard, If you want to put pictures and cutie things, put another tab in your professional resource file, in your professional portfolio at the end, and put additional information. But you have to have this for sure within the content of your portfolio. So for example, here are the examples. We go to the competency statement 3. So remember the goals? We're not gonna go to the 1. We're gonna go to the 3. We're gonna talk about the third one that says that you're able to support social and emotional development and to provide guidance, positive guidance. Remember we talk about that? That is the dream, right? So here it says, I'm making it bigger. Begin, like I said, your reflective statement about this competency standard with a paragraph. It's called competency standard, we call it goal, and describe how your teaching practices meet this standard. Note, it says, alternatively, you may also choose to write one paragraph for each functional area if this makes it easier for you, or you can write a general big paragraph as long as all the functional areas within that goal are that you have information about all of them, okay? And then When you finish that is one paragraph, right? And then you have to prepare at least one paragraph on each of the following. It says, describe some of the ways you support the development of children's positive self-concepts and growing social emotional skills. Now, this is your opportunity to shine, okay? And then when you finish that, it's going to ask you to reflect on your own philosophy of guiding young children's positive behaviors. How is your professional philosophy similar or different from how you were guided as a child? How do you constructively deal with young children's challenging behaviors? So you have like some questions here you have to answer. So I'm going to provide you with samples of how somebody answered this, okay? How somebody's preparing the reflective statement of competence number 3 based on the competency statement, is a competency statement 3 based on the competency standards. So begin with a paragraph describing how your teaching practices meet this standard, right? Okay, let's see what the candidate says. I strongly believe that children's most important characteristics for success in life are developed in their early years. My work is dedicated to help children in my care develop curiosity and confidence. Intentionality, self-regulation, relateness, communication capacity, and cooperativeness are also essential characteristics. I work to implement the latest theories and research into my practice. This competency area is a vital part of my daily work with children. So this is the style of whoever wrote. You may have your very own style, but the point is that you have to write something in a paragraph to let us know that, yes, you believe that you meet this competency, right? Okay, we'll move on. Now, what else do we have to do here? Remember that I said, okay, there is a question here. There's something we have to add. It says, now describe some of the ways you support the development of children's positive self-concepts and growing social emotional skills. So two things, right? I need to talk about how I support. So what do I do in my work to support the children's positive self-concept and also their growing social emotional skills? Let's see what the candidate wrote. The children in my class range from 3.5 to 5 years of age, and they are at various developmental levels. The younger children require more encouragement to develop independent skills. Teaching children to care for themselves is the best way to foster independence, good self-esteem, and social emotional interactions. For example, I help guide the children to take off, hang up, and store their jackets, serve themselves, and clean up at mealtime. I am there to provide guidance and deliver positive yet specific comments to support children's learning. So again, that was me, but you are you. So that's why this is so important to be your own words, Okay, so did you find the answers? What were the questions again? Did you describe some ways to support the children's positive self-concept and growing social emotional skills? Did we find them? She explained her own words, right? Okay, and this person, she or he, did not choose to do it by functional areas. But if you want to do it by functional areas, you can do that too. We will welcome both. Now, it's one more thing we have to add to that. It says also, to finish this statement, candidate, reflect on your philosophy of guiding young children's positive behaviors. How is your professional philosophy similar or different from how you were guided as a child? And how do you constructively deal with young children's challenging behavior? So two things we have to talk about. What is your philosophy? How is different or similar to your own philosophy that was used when you were a child? And how do you constructively deal with children's challenging behavior? So let's see what the candidate said. By helping children to take control of themselves, fostering independence, providing encouragement, positive guidance and choices, I create a learning environment that promotes healthy self-esteem and minimize discipline problems. I guide children by telling them or asking them what they can do instead of what they cannot do. It is important for me to speak in a calm, caring voice to children and explain the reasons for actions. This is part of my philosophy. And as I reflect on my own childhood, my experiences were very similar in my home. My parents were loving and never raised their voices. They gave me lots of reassurance, explanations, reasons, and praise, and I felt very secure. Even when I make mistakes, I want the same type of experiences for the children in my care, experiences that will mark their lives forever. My philosophy about handling children with challenging behaviors is one of prevention. I get to know the child closely and I use lots of strategies to try to, excuse me, something is to act before the non-appropriate behavior, before the behavior happens. But if it does, I use lots of language, patience, and reassurance. Also, finding the cause of the behavior is extremely important for me. So, did we find what is the philosophy of this candidate about guidance, providing positive guidance? Did we find how this philosophy is similar or different than when this person was a child? Yeah. And how do you manage challenging behaviors? Which was the last part, right? So it's here and it's in the candidate's words. And that's statement one. Number three is complete. So that's how you do each of the statements. Do you have any questions, Raquelita?
Yes, we do. Someone is asking about the latest CDA subject areas, asking where can I find out when subject areas have been updated so I can make sure that I have the latest competency standards book? That's a good question. Anytime that we make updates to the competency standards book, we do definitely announce it ahead of time. So as long as you follow us on Facebook or if you receive the Council Link newsletter, those are the two best ways to keep informed about upcoming changes. And even after the changes occur, there is always a transition time. So it's not a strict cutoff in terms of announcing new subject areas. For right now, I believe the subject areas have been the same since at least 2019. So as long as you have a competency standards book 2019 and forward, you should have the most current version. We have, though, recently updated essentials. So if you want content that is completely up to date in terms of curriculum, the essentials and the essentials workbook are the best way to get the most up-to-date content from the council. But the subject areas for right now have not changed for a while. And if we do plan to update them again, there will definitely be announcements prior to that happening.
Any other question?
Yes, we have a few questions. Will this portfolio ever move to an electronic file of some sort to be more in tune with current technology? So the answer is yes. The council is actually at this moment working on trying to incorporate some form of an online professional portfolio and potential upload capacity to the application itself. So that is still in the works, but we are definitely moving towards that in terms of trying to keep up with technology, particularly some sort of electronic format. And then we have another question, which I think you basically answered because you did go over this, but someone was asking about the actual goals. It says, so each goal is in our own words and experiences. Is there any questions we should see to make it more reflective? So I think you did go over that whole process, but I just wanted to acknowledge the question. What is the link to the newsletter? I will look for it. It's on our website, but I'll go ahead and look for it, and then I will send it in the chat so that everyone can sign up for the Council Link newsletter.
Okay, so we can move on and then we can take more questions, okay? I'm just trying to be mindful of the time and respect also your time. Um, so this is an example of how the resources may look in your resource collection in your portfolio. This is just an example again, and then how you check it as you go. And then the competency statement. Now, some people choose to do the resource collection and then the competency statement on the back, or some people choose to put all the resources together and then all of the statements together. We will accept both. Anything you want to add to this, Raquelita?
No, not right now, Vilma.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about the professional philosophy statement. So the way that I explained to you were the six, that's how you develop, how you write you prepare your six statements. Now we're going to move on to the professional philosophy statement. So the professional philosophy statement is exciting to me because this is something that only you can do, nobody else can do but you. So you write a professional philosophy statement that basically summarizes what are your beliefs, what are your values about early childhood education. It's your final reflective statement. And it's only one, okay? Differently than the six that you did before. You write it in your own words, and you write no more than 2 pages, no more than 500 words per statement. So this is something that I'm going to and then you check that you did it. Because you have come to this training, we have a rubric, like a gift for you, that will guide you on how to write this reflective task, this final reflective task, right? We already said that you summarize your professional beliefs and values about the early childhood education, and it's an experience for you to write it. So the first thing that in the book you're gonna find says to identify your values and beliefs around teaching and learning. So this rubric offers you questions that when you answer, you already talk about that. How do you believe young children learn, right? You will talk about your personal values, how your values reflect into your practice. And then we're asking you also to write about your role as an early childhood professional. So the questions for this answer are, what do you believe your role is? And what are the important aspects of your role in the lives of children and families? Then you have to write about, we want you to share your professional development experience. So the questions are, so that you can write about this, how come did you choose to become an early childhood professional? How has the experience of creating your professional portfolio contributed to your professional development? And where are you going from here professionally? What are your plans and your dreams? And last, we ask you to identify your values and beliefs around teaching and learning. How do you do this? So there we have 3 questions for you. How do you believe young children learn? And talk about your personal values. So we're going back to the first one, right? And we had 3 questions. How are your values reflected in your practice? So what is the teacher that is preparing this a portfolio answer? How did she or he do in answering this question? So this is the piece to identify your values and belief around teaching and learning. So this person said, as an early childhood educator, I am responsible for providing young children with a rich environment in which they can feel safe to explore, feel free to express themselves, initiate learning, and have positive learning experiences that address the needs of learners. My philosophy towards the education of young children is influenced by the theories of Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. Children are individuals who develop in their own unique way. Therefore, I tailor learning experiences and teaching strategies to individual abilities and interests. So, by embracing differentiated instruction, I'm able to tap into their knowledge and create activities that are tailored to the children's level. So that is what I believe about teaching and learning. Okay, so that is answer. So we go to the next one. Write about your role as a professional, right? What do you believe your role is? And what are the important aspects of your role in the lives of children and families? So what This person said is, I firmly believe that being an early childhood teacher is very important because the experiences we provide to our students in our classroom will determine whether they consider learning a positive or negative experience for years to come. For that reason, my goal as a teacher is to provide children with a lot of opportunities or experiences that motivate them to learn, to engage in play, and encourage them to interact with their peers and adults in positive ways, and to make friends and choices in an environment that is enriching and stimulating. My role as an early childhood teacher is to guide the learning process, provide learning basic foundations for a child education life experiences. Children need to be treated positively. Therefore, I provide an environment where children and families from different cultural backgrounds feel welcome and accepted. Furthermore, I develop a very trusting and open-minded relationship with families to work together to meet their child's needs. In addition, I consider myself a cultural responsive teacher by recognizing their uniqueness, respecting their cultural differences, and adding education related to the culture of the students. So that is the role. That's what this person felt. Next, share your professional development experience. How did you choose to become an early childhood professional? How was your experience creating your portfolio? And how the experience contributed to your professional development? And where are you going from here professionally? What are your plans and dreams? So this person said, when building my portfolio, I learned a lot about myself. I did not realize how much I know, and I learned to organize my knowledge into 6 goals and 13 functional areas. And I have armed myself with resources to help others, like the families I serve. I learned how unique and important is my profession. I enjoy putting time into my portfolio just like I enjoy putting time into educating my children. I have loved the process of building it. What I plan to do next in my professional life when obtaining my child development associate is to start the process of opening a daycare. I know it will take time, but I'm willing to start this journey. My goal is to one day own a successful early childhood program business. Okay, so that is for that, and that was the last one. Raquel is going to take us to this little brief summary of what we have gone through, organized in the portfolio. Raquelita.
Vilma, I actually think that this slide is not working correctly. We would have to fast forward a couple of
Okay,
slides.
okay, we will
Mhm.
fast forward then. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay,
I think it would be
examples.
the last slide that has
Yeah,
some screens like this, some
yeah,
shots like this.
so they can have an idea how the tabs work, etc. We gave you some idea.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it might be the
okay,
next slide.
okay. Let me see. Okay, let me see. Okay, I think that this is how the,
Here we go. This one, I think it is. Not 100.
okay,
Actually, it's the next slide.
okay, so we go. Thank you so much.
Here we go.
Here we
Okay.
go. Okay,
So this is just an example of what the professional portfolio can look like once it's completely put together with the tabs and all the cover sheets. And so the first cover sheet, of course, is the My CDA Professional Portfolio cover sheet. This is essentially the table of contents. This is the order in which the portfolio should be put together. And Vilma showed earlier that as the candidate completes each section, they should be checking it off as well. So it also acts as a checklist as well as a table of contents. So behind tab A, we have the summary of My CDA education cover sheet, and this would be filled out where the candidate confirms that they have at least 10 hours in each of those 8 CDA subject areas. And then right behind it, they should have the documentation of their 120 clock hours of training. And then tab B will have the family questionnaire summary sheet also already filled out with all of the information. And right behind it, it will have all of the completed family questionnaires that the candidate was able to get back from the families. The next section is section C, which will include the reflective dialogue worksheet. And at this point, A and B, boxes A and B should be pre-filled out by the candidate based on their reflective process of looking through their family questionnaires, and the rest of that sheet will be filled out with the PD specialist during the verification visit. And then tabs D, E, and F, G, H, and I will all have similar sections here where there will be resource collection. And then right behind the resource collection will be the reflective statement that corresponds to those resource items. And then the last section is section J, or tab J, and that's where the philosophy statement should be found. So again, this is just a really quick example of what that portfolio will look like once it's put together. And then just some helpful reminders. The professional portfolio has to be completed before the candidate submits their application, not during, not it's okay as long as it's done before the visit. This is something that's done prior to, and actually the candidate is required to confirm on their application that they have completed the professional portfolio prior to submitting payment. The candidate has to bring the completed professional portfolio to the verification visit with the PD specialist, because this is when the specialist will review the contents of the portfolio to make sure that all the required information is there, that it is relevant to the credential type that the candidate is applying for, and that it has been prepared based on the language specialization requirements as well. Vilma stated earlier, candidates can apply in various languages, again, based on the language they use in their daily work with children and families. And with that, there are certain requirements of the portfolio for candidates that are applying either monolingual in another language or bilingual English in another language. There are certain parts of the portfolio that will need to be presented either in two languages if they're applying bilingual, or if they're applying monolingual in another language. The majority of that portfolio has to be completed in that language. And again, those requirements are set forth in the competency standards book. The reflective statements of competence and the philosophy statement must be written in the candidate's own words. So no plagiarizing, no copying or quotes from other writers unless attributed to those writers. They should not ask someone to translate their work. So for candidates who are applying in English and maybe English is not their first language, that's okay. We want to see this information written in the candidate's own words, because we're not grading based on grammar, punctuation. We're grading on whether or not the candidate can clearly communicate their beliefs in terms of early childhood education. And the PD specialist is also looking for that those statements are written in the candidate's own words. So if the candidate doesn't have perfect English, that should reflect in their statements as well. So if there's a huge difference in terms of written and writing styles, that may raise a red flag for the PD specialist, because they may think that either they got them professionally translated or they wrote them in their preferred language and someone translated for them into English. Again, we're not looking for perfect writing. We're just looking for someone who can communicate the information in a way that can be understood, which is why we have that literacy component as one of the requirements for applying for the CDA. And then just at the bottom, we have that scoring is based on the written content, not the style, the level, or grammar. And then candidates also have to remember to bring the original competency standards book to the verification visit as well, the portfolio and the competency standards book. And this is because the PD specialist needs to take out the original comprehensive scoring instrument in the back of each of those competency standards books. That is what they use during the verification visit to conduct and gather the information that they need for the verification visit. Here we just have a quick recap of the session objectives. We outlined the professional portfolio components and the professional philosophy statement. We described how to prepare all the necessary cover sheets and the fact that they're all in the competency standards book. We went over some of the resource collection and the meaning of each resource. And we provided a comprehensive explanation of the statements of competence and the professional philosophy statements, and offered a few helpful reminders throughout the session.
So much, Raquel. We're going to take some questions in a few seconds. I just wanted to remind you of the wonderful opportunity to join the Council Alumni Network, most known as CAN, C-A-N, today, if you're not a member, and take full advantage of all the opportunities to engage and connect with peers, colleagues, council, staff, and other participants. This is like a social platform, social slash professional platform, like a Facebook, but 100% better, where you will find ways to interact with each other, even form your specific groups, get ideas, share activities, etc., etc., and also the opportunity to be invited to events that where you will meet with people that is very hard regularly to meet. You know, you see them in a conference very far away, but we have people that are, you know, very important in our field, and it's free. So I urge you to join councilcan.org is the link that you should go to join council, the CAN, you know, the group. So we're gonna take some questions. I think we still have time for questions. Raquel, do we have any questions left?
We do. Let's see. Somebody is asking about Google Translate. Can candidates use Google Translate to translate? I would strongly suggest to stay away from Google Translate. Yes, technically it is the candidate's own words that are being translated from one language to another, but that's a form of getting assistance, just like if you gave your document to another person and they translated it for you. It's still your own work, but somebody else is translating. I don't know, Vilma, if you can better connect that literacy requirement with why we don't want people to use Google Translates or aids to translate.
I was gonna say, you know, that concerns me. That question concerns me because the first thing that comes to my mind is why do you need to use Google Translate? Which tells me, is that because you don't meet the literacy requirement? If you are applying for a CDA, you have to meet that requirement. So there is no need really for any type of translation. If you're applying in English, you should be fluent in English, read, write, speak. If you're applying in Spanish, the same. If you're applying in any other language, it's the same too. You should be able to read, write, speak that language with enough fluency to work and to fulfill the duties of a CDA. So I don't know why, you know, but if you're applying for bilingual, it's the same. You have to be able to meet the language requirements and be proficient in English and in the other language the same way. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you so much, Raquelita. Any other questions?
Yes, someone's asking about the recording again, about the webinar. Yes, so the recording will be posted in CAN in the Media Center. And once it's posted, you will receive a link to the recording, but it will require you, if you are not a current member of CAN, at that point, you can sign up to become a member of CAN. And then you will have access to the recording in the Media Center. And that link usually goes out a week after the presentation. So just be looking for an email that will contain that link for you. Let's see, looking to see.
Any more questions?
Yes, I'm looking for some questions here. Is CAN membership free? Yes, it's a free membership. There is no fee to join CAN.
And there are different groups already set, but you can form your own group. There's the groups by areas, like the Southeast group, Southwest group, home visitors have a group. It's like a membership. And within that membership, you can form your very own groups. So it's really wonderful. Okay.
Somebody is asking, I'm not 100% sure about this question. Would you take the ECE register info for the 120 PD hours? I think I would ask a clarifying question. Are you referring to the state registry, your state registry? Is that what you're referring to? If you are, the council has a relationship with the National Workforce Registry through which certain state registries are now approved. So if you are looking to see if your state has been officially approved through this agreement with the National Workforce Registry, you can go to our website. There is a new section on our website that does list all of the current registries that have been through the approval process. So if you see your state listed there, then yes, you can submit that registry printout as proof of 120 hours of training. If you don't see your state listed there, then unfortunately that would mean that at this time you would not be able to use that as official documentation of training. But it is a new section on our website. So let me see if I can find it real quick so I can tell you exactly where it is.
Can I address another
It is,
question while you do that?
yeah, I found it.
Okay,
It's under
you
the,
done, okay.
yeah, from our main page, it is the menu option partnering organizations. You'll find the section that says approved state professional workforce registries. So that's where you would need to go to check to see if your state has been approved. Another question. Does the CAN membership cover renewal requirement for professional membership? No, it does not. However, if you are looking for a free membership for renewal, you can always join High Scope. They do offer a free membership, and their website is highscope.org. We have a question. What if I do not need my CDA, but I am a trainer and help staff get their CDA? Can I join CAN? Vilma, do you want to answer that?
Sure, CAN is for everyone, friends of the council, wanna be friends of the council, instructors, people who are candidates, people who are CDAs. Basically, everybody has a space in CAN. Yes, thank you.
Real quick, I just want to jump in for clarification. Candidates are not eligible to join CAN. They do have to earn their credential. They do still get access to these events, but candidates are not eligible yet to join. But if you are a trainer, if you are an educator in any capacity, if you support CDA candidates, if you work in higher education, if you work in policy and it's on behalf of early childhood, you are eligible to join.
Thanks, Alicia. Yes, and once a candidate is awarded their credential, in their award email, they will receive an invitation to join CAN. The email includes the link to join CAN. We have some questions about renewal. How often does the CDA need to be renewed? The CDA does need to be renewed every 3 years, and we do strongly encourage candidates to submit their applications prior to their expiration date. The window to allow you to submit a renewal application actually opens up 6 months before your credential expires. So if you meet all of the requirements within that 6-month window, you can go ahead and submit your application early. If not, you just want to make sure that you do submit that application on or before the expiration date. Let's see. I have some people asking. Okay, I'll just keep going with the renewal. It says, what does the renewal require? The requirements for renewal are sort of a continuation of those initial application prerequisite requirements. So in order to renew, candidates will need to have new training. They'll have to have at least 45 hours of new training. And just like with the initial process, it does need to be specific to the age group of the credential type that is being renewed. They will also have to have some continued work with children, even if they no longer work in that same setting. The requirement for renewal is that candidates have at least 80 hours of experience working with children in the same setting and with the same age group as that original credential. They're also going to have become a member of an early childhood organization. And they're going to have to keep their first aid and their infant and child CPR current. Now, all of this is documented not via the council, but the candidate will have to select two people. The first one we call the verifier. This is the person who is going to review the candidate's training and membership documentation, and then they will fill out part of the candidate's renewal application. The other person is the ECE reviewer, who will verify that the candidate has worked at least 80 hours with children within the past year in the same setting and age group as the credential being renewed. This person is required to have firsthand knowledge of the renewal candidate's work with children, because they will also be writing a recommendation or submitting a recommendation for this candidate based on their work, those 80 hours of work experience. And that recommendation is also based on the continued implementation of those CDA competency standards and 13 functional areas in their daily work. Somebody's asking about renewal amnesty. Well, the council does offer renewal amnesty every few years. The last time we offered it was during COVID. So potentially there might be an amnesty in the near future, but those amnesties are always a surprise. And they're not guaranteed, but I would say, again, just follow us on Facebook or Council Link, because if and when we do offer it, it will definitely be announced on Facebook and through Council Link. Someone's asking, when is our next webinar? Well, we have one in a little bit, in half an hour. We're presenting the same webinar in Spanish, but Vilma, do you know when our next webinar is after that in this series?
I believe that the next webinar, I am looking, I don't have it in the top of my head, but it's in August.
Sorry.
Do
Can I
you
jump
have
in?
Alicia?
Yes, I do have that information, and I can put the link to all the events in CAN that are open to everybody. But the next webinar is actually July 30th, and that's for the overview of the CDA process. And that one is also being presented in English and Spanish on that day.
Okay, yes. July 30th. I was a little ahead. I was thinking it was August, but it's in July. Yeah, and if you are a member of CAN, we post all of the webinars, so that you don't miss any of them. Any other questions? We have 4 minutes for questions.
Oh, someone's asking about not receiving their certificate. So I'm not sure if you're referring to the actual CDA credential. If you were awarded and it's been more than 15 days and you have not received your credential, you should definitely call our customer support department to let them know that you haven't received your credential in the mail, and they will ask you some questions, and then they will oops, need to put somebody on mute. And then they will send you off another copy of your credential. If that is not what you were referring to, please let me know. Okay, so the last question will be, what is the process when candidates don't pass the test? So candidates, once they complete the exam and the verification visit, they get their credentialing decision. They will either get an email saying that they've been awarded the credential, or in some cases, they may get an email stating that we are unable to award the credential at this time. That letter does not specify whether or not someone has passed or failed the exam. It states that we're not able to award the credential after evaluating a candidate's performance on both components, the exam and the verification visit. And we make our credentialing decision based on a candidate's performance in the 13 functional areas. And so that letter will include the 3 functional areas that we consider to be areas of growth for the candidate, both on the exam and the verification visit. So if a candidate does receive a denial letter, they will also receive appeals procedures along with that. And the candidate has the option to submit an appeal within 30 days of us sending that letter to them. And the appeals are based on procedural violations. So if the candidate feels that there were procedural violations that may have occurred either during the visit or during the exam process, they would add a comment to their application and submit it to us for review. And of course, we follow up on any information that may indicate to us that there may have been a procedural violation. We'll follow up, and then we make a decision on the appeal. Part of that process sometimes does involve allowing the candidate to retake the exam or retake the visit, depending on where we may find the violation. So that would be the process for a candidate who is not awarded the credential. And I think that's all the questions we have time for today, Vilma.
Just wanted to for you to remember that candidates are evaluated on the competency standards. Remember, we talk about those goals and the functional areas. So that's the feedback they get is based on that. You get assessed different ways. You know, the assessment covers different ways. The professional portfolio is one of them. Again, you know, the observation is another piece of the final assessment. The exam is another piece. Together, they showed us if you have reached that level of competence to get the credential, or if you still need more training. And I think that's basically what happens with the entire assessment for CDA. Okay. I was responding to the question about, you know, are we gonna know if we pass the exam? Like, also, we don't provide answers like you fail or you didn't get your CDA because question 14 was not accurate. We don't do that. It's the global picture of your performance. Correct, Raquelita?
Yes, correct, Vilma.
Okay. Okay, well, we have come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for being here with us. We wish you the best in your work. And again, you know, we encourage you to join CAN so that you can take the opportunity of the wonderful benefits that it offers. And it's free. Raquel, and we want to thank you also. We want to thank Alicia Carter for being behind the scenes, helping us. She's the engine behind CAN, and we love to work together. So we thank her. Raquel, anything else to say goodbye?
Yep, thanks everyone for joining today, and we hope to see you in some of our future webinars.
Yeah, and much success in everything you do. Goodbye.